Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Bhavesh, Junior Resident in Department of Medicine at AIIMS. I will be discussing about pathogenesis of COVID-19. I would like to start by thanking my preceptors, Dr. Pankaj Jorwal and Dr. Piyush Ranjan, consultants in Department of Medicine at AIIMS. This is the overview of our discussion. We will be discussing about the virus, how it enters the human body, how it enters the host cell and how it replicates. We will see what are the changes that are seen in our immune system and what constitutes the pathogenesis of immune dysregulation and cytokine storm, the role of immune evasion in the pathogenesis. We will see how COVID-19 is a vascular disease, the hypercoagulability that is seen in patients with COVID-19, and we will try to learn a few things from autopsy reports of patients with COVID-19. Finally, we will see what are the various drugs that have targeted the various steps of pathogenesis. So let us start with a brief discussion about the virus. As we all know, SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 virus is a positive sense single-stranded enveloped RNA virus. It belongs to the lineage B of beta subgroup of coronaviruses. Genome-wide phylogenetic analysis has indicated that COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 is more similar to SARS-CoV-1 or SARS virus with a sequence homology of 79.5%. It shares 50% sequence homology with MERS virus. This is the structure of the virus. As we can see here, in the center is a RNA viral genome which is surrounded by nucleocapsid, and on the outer side there is an envelope. On envelope there are various structural proteins. The one which is marked here is the spike protein or S protein. This spike protein or S protein is embedded in the form of a crown, and hence the name coronavirus to these viruses. This spike protein is a trimeric protein and is the one which is binding to the human host receptors. Let us see how the virus enters the human body. Virus entering the human body would be the first step in the pathogenesis of COVID-19. The virus spreads from human to human through close contact. Respiratory droplets and fomites are considered to be the important mode of spread of infection. Aerosol spread as a mode of spread is still not very clear, but evidence is mounting against it being common mode of spread. The virus has been detected in stool, but its significance in spreading infection is not yet clear. Virus has also been detected in semen of patients with COVID-19. It is still not known if sexual transmission can occur. Also, there is no definitive evidence of vertical spread from mother to baby either during childbirth or during pregnancy. Let us see how the virus enters the host cell and how it replicates. So as we had seen previously, the S protein or the spike protein is the one which is binding to the human host receptors. The host receptor here is ACE2 receptor. Viral entry into the host cell involves two processes. First, the virus has to bind to the host receptor. Later on, the viral membrane should fuse with the membrane of the cell membrane. S protein does both receptor binding and membrane fusion. So these are the various receptors used by other important coronaviruses. As we have seen here, SARS-CoV-2 is using ACE2 receptor. SARS-CoV-1 or SARS virus also used ACE2 receptor for its cell entry. MERS virus used a different receptor called DPP4 or dipeptidyl peptidase 4. So the mode of entry into the host cell, S protein, like any other protein, is made up of amino acids, and amino acid will have a C terminal and N terminal. Therefore, the S protein also has a C terminal and N terminal. The C terminal is called the S2 domain and the N terminal domain is called S1 domain. As we can see in the image here, the S1 domain is the one which is binding to the ACE2 receptor, forming the receptor binding domain. The S2 domain will subsequently help in fusion of the viral membrane with the host cell membrane. It is important to know this because between S1 and S2 are various bonds which have to be cleaved before the virus fuses with the cell. This cleavage is brought about by a protease enzyme called TMPRSS2. This TMPRSS2 stands for transmembrane protease serine 2. This enzyme will mediate the cleavage of S1 S2 and facilitate viral entry. This becomes important because we have a drug called nefamostat which will inhibit this TMPRSS2 enzyme and prevent the viral entry into the host cell. A few special points about COVID-19. The S protein of COVID-19 binds to AS2 with 10 times more affinity than the SARS virus. The initial primary viral infection occurs in upper respiratory tract and later the virus spreads to lower respiratory tract and GI mucosa, subsequently leading to mild viremia. Let us see how the virus replicates. So just like any other RNA virus, the virus enters the host cell, uncoats, RNA biosynthesis occurs and the virus is released from the cell. Again, this becomes important because at each of these steps we have various drugs acting and are being used or being considered for patients with COVID-19. So let us speak a few points about ACE2. As we have seen, the virus is entering the human host through these ACE2 receptors. ACE2 stands for angiotensin converting enzyme 2. It is a type 1 transmembrane glycoprotein and it is widely expressed in the human body and is present in lung, heart, kidney, intestine, nasal mucosa, bronchus, esophagus, stomach, bladder and ileum. ACE2 is a negative regulator of ACE. What I mean by negative regulator is that ACE2 is decreasing the production of ACE. This becomes important later in the pathogenesis of COVID-19. Let us see the mechanism of action of these ACE2 and ACE enzymes. In the renin-angiotensin system, we know that angiotensinogen is converted to angiotensin 1 by renin enzyme and later on angiotensin 1 is acted upon by ACE enzyme to produce angiotensin 2. This angiotensin 2 through AT1 receptors causes vasoconstrictive effect. Also, it has a pro-inflammatory effect and increases proliferation. ACE2 enzyme acts on angiotensin 2 and produces angiotensin 1,7 which has a vasodilatory and anti-inflammatory properties opposite to angiotensin 2. Therefore, ACE2 is a protective enzyme here. Now let us see what are the various changes that are seen in our immune response. An adequate immune response against viral infection involves production of specific cytotoxic T cells and development of specific neutralizing antibodies. The virus is presented to the immune response by major histocompatibility receptors and are presented by antigen presenting cells. Both MHC1 and MHC2 are important in patients with COVID disease, but MHC1 is found to be more significantly involved. As we can see here, MHC1 activates mature cytotoxic T cells, while MHC2 response will activate T helper cells to differentiate either into Th1 or Th2 subsets. This will activate cellular and humoral immunity. Therefore, understandably, both are important in patients with COVID-19. Let us see what are the various changes that are seen in humoral immunity in patients with COVID-19. Just like in any other infection, IgM is formed against S protein and it is the first to be increased and later IgG appears in the blood. IgG may play a protective role in these patients. The changes seen in cellular immunity. T cells seem to be the primary target in these patients. There is a decrease in CD4 positive T cells, CD8 positive T cells, helper T cells and suppressor T cells. Also, the CD4 and CD8 T cells that are decreased are also found to be hyperactivated in these patients. All this leads to an increase in infection related biomarkers and inflammatory cytokines. B cells are found to have no significant change in numbers. These changes translate in blood picture as lymphocytopenia and leukocytosis. Patients are found to have low lymphocyte count, increased neutrophils, and increased neutrophil lymphocyte ratio. Leukocytosis is common in patients with severe COVID disease. One mechanism by which lymphocytopenia is being explained is that at the site of tissue injury, a lot of lymphocytes are preferentially being attracted than neutrophils. Therefore, there is a deficiency, there is a shift from blood to the injured site of lymphocytes, and therefore a lymphocytopenia in blood. More the lymphocytopenia, it indicates that more the number of lymphocytes have migrated to the damaged tissue site. Therefore, more severe the disease. Baseline lymphocyte count is found to be higher among survivors than non-survivors, indicating that lymphocytopenia is a predictor of mortality. Pathogenesis of immune dysregulation or cytokine storm. So we had seen that the immune response was not adequate, it was dysregulated, and we will now try to find out what are the various reasons why this immune response was dysregulated. The important reasons are rapid viral replication and cellular damage, virus-induced ACE2 downregulation and shedding, antibody-dependent enhancement, and immune evasion. So rapid viral replication and tissue damage. This rapid viral replication and cellular damage will cause epithelial and endothelial cell damage. This epithelial and endothelial cell damage will cause increased vascular leakage and inflammation. This manifests as ARDS in lungs. So this rapid viral replication and cellular damage will independently attract an inflammatory response, and this inflammatory response in COVID-19, as we saw, was dysregulated, causing further increase in cellular damage. This damage will further increase the inflammatory response, establishing a vicious cycle. Also, the healthy cells in the vicinity of these damaged cells secrete pro-inflammatory cytokines, increasing the inflammatory response and hence the damage. Another thing that is seen in patients with COVID-19 is ACE2 downregulation and shedding. So we have seen that the virus entered the host cell using the ACE2 receptors. Once the virus enters the human host cell, it will downregulate and cause shedding of any ACE2 that is present on the cell membrane. This ACE2, as we had seen previously, was causing a shift from angiotensin 2 induced vasoconstrictive pro-inflammatory effect to angiotensin 1,7 induced vasodilatory and anti-inflammatory effect. The decrease in ACE2 will therefore shift the balance towards a pro-inflammatory effect. The increased inflammation and vascular leakage in the lungs leads to development of ARDS. Also, dysfunctional ACE2 is responsible for dysfunctional pulmonary hemodynamics. So this is the image that is establishing the fact that decreased ACE2 will cause increased vasoconstrictive and pro-inflammatory effect. At this point, we will also discuss the effect of angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors or ACE inhibitors and ARBs or angiotensin receptor blockers. What these drugs tend to do is they will block the pathway of angiotensin 2 AT1 receptor pathway and therefore block the vasoconstrictive pro-inflammatory effect. Also, what it does is it increases the ACE2. So there has what ultimately happens is the increased ACE2 will either increase the viral entry because of increased number of receptors being present, or it will have an anti-inflammatory beneficial effect on because of its angiotensin 1,7 being produced. The balance between these two will determine whether ACE inhibitors and ARBs are either protective or harmful to the human body. At present, it does not appear to be harmful, at least. Antibody-dependent enhancement has also been proposed as a mechanism of pathogenesis in COVID-19. It was playing an important role in pathogenesis of SARS infection, at least. So what happens is this coronavirus does not have a receptor receptor on host immune cells such as macrophages and monocytes to enter these cells. But once a subneutralizing or a non-neutralizing antibody binds to coronavirus, Now we can this coronavirus can use the Fc receptor on the host cells, macrophages and monocytes, to enter into the host cell. So here we can see coronavirus bound by a subneutralizing or a non-neutralizing antibody entering the monocyte macrophages, which previously did not have any receptors for coronaviruses. And after entering these cells, it will replicate and increase in number, further increasing the tissue damage. So all this will result in an increase in pro-inflammatory cytokines and chemokines. This increased pro-inflammatory cytokines and chemokines, the consumption of CD4 and CD8 positive T cells, and the decrease of regulatory T cells will all result in an aggravated inflammatory response. This is manifested as cytokine storm, and it makes the tissue damage worse. This tissue damage in lungs manifests in the form of ARDS. Genetic susceptibility and inflammatory response or cytokine storm are associated with ARDS development in these patients. Let us discuss whatever we have seen till now in the form of a flow chart. So we know that either because of respiratory droplets or because of direct contact, the virus has entered the human body. It has entered through the upper respiratory tract, establishing infection in nasal cavity and pharynx, and later on spreading to lower respiratory tract. At this point, some patients will have mild viremia, cause development of specific cytotoxic T cells, and causes clearance of the virus. And the patient becomes asymptomatic or maybe has just mild symptoms. This is what happens in a majority of patients, but in some patients, there is a dysregulated immune response causing cytokine storm. Either because of antibody dependent enhancement, or because of the overactivation of T cells, or because of ACE2 downregulation or shedding, there is an increased inflammatory response and also an increased vascular permeability. This manifests as cytokine storm, causing ARDS, multiple tissue organ damage, and death. Let us see the role of immune evasion in the pathogenesis of COVID-19. Immune evasion refers to virus escaping the host immune response. Multiple mechanisms have been proposed for the viral evasion of the immune response. Various structural and non-structural proteins are involved. They inhibit the type 1 interferon expression. They inhibit host double-stranded RNA sensors. They inhibit host RNA interferon mechanisms, and they also inhibit the PAMP-PRR interaction by forming double membrane vesicles. Let us speak about a few of them. Type 1 interferon refers to interferon alpha and interferon beta. This type 1 interferon is very essential in initial antiviral response. What happens in patients with COVID-19 is this type 1 interferon release is being inhibited by virus. This will hinder the body's antiviral response. Subsequently, once the hindrance is lost, there will be excessive release of interferons in the subsequent part of the disease, and this release of interferon will become more harmful at that time because it will increase the inflammatory response, and also it will induce the apoptosis of T cells which could have cleared the virus. Therefore, an early burst of type 1 interferon leads to protection, but in contrast, a delay in interferon production causes an inability to control viral replication, leading to cellular damage of airway epithelia and the lung parenchyma, and eventual lethal inflammatory cytokine storm. We have got various drugs which are targeting this interferon pathway, and interferon itself being used in patients with COVID-19. Now let us see the role of PAMP-PRR interaction. PAMP stands for pathogen associated molecular patterns. These are some conserved molecular patterns in pathogens which are recognized by human host immune response. PRR stand for pattern recognition receptors. These are some receptors that are present on immune cells. So what happens is, when the virus or any pathogen enters the human body, some molecular patterns will be recognized by our immune response, and they will recognize that the body is being infected by a foreign antigen. What happens in COVID-19 is these molecular patterns are bound by a double membrane vesicle and therefore escapes the recognition by these antigen presenting cells and other immune cells, and therefore our body does not recognize that it is being infected and is not able to develop an adequate immune response against this infection. So in this way, the virus is escaping an immune response from human body. At this stage, let us see COVID-19 as a vascular disease. A constellation of multi-system organ involvement, low-grade inflammation, lymphopenia, hypercoagulability, heterogeneous microvascular dysfunction are all form a classic description of many systemic vasculopathies such as vasculitides. All these features are also seen in patients with COVID-19, making a few argue that vascular disease is an important part in pathogenesis of COVID-19. Let us see how vascular damage occurs. Capillary endothelium is also found to have ACE2 receptors. Therefore, the virus can enter the capillary endothelium and cause cytopathic changes in this endothelium. Also, the cytokine storm that has occurred will cause destruction of vascular endothelium. Once the endothelium is damaged, there are multiple things that can happen. The endothelial damage will attract the inflammatory response, and this dysregulated inflammatory response will further aggravate the tissue damage. Also, we know that the endothelial cells secrete various vasodilatory substances. Once the endothelium is damaged, these vasodilatory substances are no longer present and the vasoconstrictive effect will predominate, leading to ischemia and tissue damage. Also, the endothelial damage will expose the various von Willebrand factors that are present on the basement membrane, therefore stimulating the thrombus formation. Also seen in patients with COVID-19 is a hypercoagulable state, which will further increase the tendency of formation of a thrombus. All this will eventually lead to ischemia and tissue damage seen in patients with COVID-19 disease. As we had seen, hypercoagulability is seen in patients with COVID-19. The increased inflammation manifests in the form of increased cytokines like IL-6, which has a procoagulant activity and antifibrinolytic activity. Also, hypoxia itself is a stimulator of coagulatory system. A role of anticoagulants is thus established in patients with COVID-19. An important way to learn about the pathogenesis of any disease is by looking at the autopsy findings in patients with this disease. This study is one of the earliest study of autopsy in patients with COVID-19 published from Wuhan. What they had found was there was evidence of ARDS changes in lungs in patients with severe COVID-19 disease. There were bilateral diffuse alveolar damage with cellular fibromyxoid exudates and hyaline membrane formation with desquamation of pneumocytes was seen. Findings consistent with ARDS. This is a recent study published on 6th May 2020, a prospective study involving 12 patients who had died from COVID-19. They performed a complete autopsy, including post-mortem CT and histopathologic and virologic analysis. So what they had found was there was an increased evidence of thromboembolic phenomena in the form of DVT and pulmonary embolism and diffuse thrombus formation elsewhere. Autopsy revealed DVT in 7 out of 12 patients, especially because in these patients previously DVT was not even suspected. Pulmonary embolism was found to be a direct cause of death in 4 out of 12 patients. Also, CT revealed changes consistent with ARDS. In all patients, SARS-CoV-2 RNA was detected in lung at high concentrations. Also, viremia coincided with high viral RNA titers in liver, kidney and heart. Now let us see what were the macroscopic and microscopic changes in various tissues of the human body in patients dying from severe COVID-19 disease. In lungs, what they found was the lungs were heavy and congested, and also there was a distinct patchy pattern of alternating areas of pale and blue hypercapillarized deep reddish areas. These features were consistent with microvascular occlusion occurring in lungs. Macroscopic analysis of other organs was not significant except for mild splenomegaly seen in 3 out of 12 cases. On microscopic analysis, in lungs, Diffuse alveolar damage consistent with early ARDS was seen in 8 patients. Also, microthrombi were regularly found within small lung arteries, also occasionally in prostate, but not much in other organs. Microscopic analysis of other organs was significant for changes of chronic pharyngitis in 6 out of 7 patients whose pharyngeal mucosa was examined. One patient had lymphocytic myocarditis in the right ventricle. The remaining histopathologic changes were compatible with shock changes in part of the diseased patient or corresponded to the macroscopically determined virus independent pre-existing pathology. That is, none of the changes seen in other organs were suggestive of a direct viral induced cytopathic changes. This study demonstrated a high incidence of thromboembolic events and suggested an important role of COVID-19 induced coagulopathy in its pathogenesis. At this point, let us just briefly see a few drugs targeting various parts in the pathogenesis of COVID-19. Targeting the viral entry and its replication, drugs are chemostat, arbidol, and nefamostat, which are inhibiting the viral entry. Also, hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine has one of its actions as inhibiting viral entry. Lopinavir, darunavir, ribavirin, remdesivir, favipiravir are all various drugs which are targeting viral replication. All these drugs are being studied and being considered for use in patients with COVID-19 disease. Now let us see the role of immunomodulatory therapy. From our discussion till now, we have recognized that immune dysregulation is one of the important mechanisms of tissue damage in patients with severe COVID disease. Therefore, it feels that immunomodulatory agents will have protective role in patients with this destructive immune response. Corticosteroids, chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, tocilizumab are the important immunomodulatory drugs that are being considered currently. The other immunomodulatory drugs that are being considered are rilonacept, canakinumab, anakinra, siltuximab, tocilizumab, sarilumab, JAK inhibitors, targeting various pathways involved in this dysregulated immune response. Also, hydroxychloroquine, let us speak a few points about hydroxychloroquine. It inhibits the entry of virus into the host cell. Also, it has immunomodulatory effect in the form of decreasing the immune dysregulation. Also, nitazoxanide, a very commonly available drug, has now been considered in patients with COVID-19. It will cause the changes of the interferon pathway dysregulation that was seen in COVID-19 and is being considered in patients with COVID-19. To summarize, the exact pathogenesis is still unclear, but immune dysregulation, viral cytopathic changes, and hypercoagulability are together responsible for the damage seen. Immunomodulatory drugs are being increasingly considered for treatment with promising results. Understanding pathogenesis in detail will help us further in better treatment and prevention strategies. These are the important references that I had used.